Everybody, welcome back to day one of our 10th Indie Game Business Sessions Conference. A big thank you, as always, to our friends over at Tripwire Presents for helping us along, and Will as our sponsors, Xola and Vicarious PR. But without further ado, I will hand it over to our two speakers for the day to introduce themselves, and I will get out of the way.
Thank you, Jay. So I'm going to start because I have the pleasure today of doing a fireside chat with Carolina Torres. My name is Heather Chandler, and I am with Heather Makes Games. I'm a game consultant. I have worked in the game industry for over 25 years in the area of production for places like Activision, EA, Ubisoft, Epic Games. I've also worked a lot with Eline Media, which is where I met Carolina, and we have worked together for many years on some very exciting projects, which we will be talking about today. Carolina, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Carolina Torres. I was born in Colombia. I've been with Eline for about 10 years. For those of you that don't know Eline, we are a boutique indie game developer and publisher. We're best known for titles like Never Alone and Beyond Blue. Never Alone, we co-created with our Alaska Native partners at the Cook Inlet Tribal, CITC, and to bring Alaska Native culture to a global audience. Beyond Blue is an ocean exploration game that we made in collaboration with the BBC. And as a studio, all our games have social impact. It is important for us that our games allow players to reflect on current and pressing issues, bring attention to underrepresented voices, explore meaningful themes, especially around cultures that are not commonly represented in games and popular media.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so I've had the pleasure of working with Carolina and Eline on both Never Alone and Beyond Blue, which we'll be discussing a little bit today. Let's start by defining inclusive development. I'm sure there's people out there that are like, what does that mean exactly? So how do you define that?
That's a great question, Heather. And I would say it's a framework that it was born just from working in our games and trying to find a process that would allow us to bring authenticity into the games that we make. It includes finding, the right partner, having the right shared goals, build trust, have a transparent communication and feedback, and just a continuous balancing of creating creative, cultural impact, and commercial needs. It is also very critical that whoever you're working with have the same aligned interests, and that you ensure that you're there to collaborate, to recognizing the other, what their expertise is, what your expertise is, and just come together to co-create, in this case, our games like we did with Never Alone and Beyond Blue. And I would say that at the end it's a process of mutual learning in which both partners end up becoming true creative partners. And I always love to tell that when we first started working with our Alaska Native partners, the attitude was we want to learn as much about game development as we at Eline wanted to learn about their culture. And it was that framing and my mindset that really allowed us to come together to do something that was really meaningful and I think was transformative.
That's wonderful. So when you talk about inclusive development, does that just mean people like indigenous cultures, or are there other ways that you are inclusive in the development process? For example, with Beyond Blue, I just want to help better understand, what does inclusive cover? Is it just sort of different cultures, or is it other aspects as well?
Since it's a framework, it covers any game that we do. So it can cover cultures. It can cover, in the case of Beyond Blue, an area of expertise about the ocean. We didn't know a lot about it, so we partner with scientists that help us figure out what will be the right content to cover. For example, in the different depths of the ocean, what kind of biomes and animals you will be able to see so it is correctly. And they also, just as we work very closely with our Alaska Native partners, they embed in our teams. We have one of the scientists actually come to our Phoenix studio and spend many months sitting next to each other with our team and working together. And inclusive development is, we see it as a way where, again, we are equal partners, and it's not that we are poking every other month, like, oh, I have this set of questions, can you answer for me, and then go back to the team and do their thing. Is really, they're another team member, and they're working hand in hand. And also, I would say the inclusive development cover, your team, cover the content that you make, and also cover the community that is around the game.
That's wonderful. Does and then we'll move on to the framework, but again, does inclusive development mean, is it code for educational games? Like if you were being inclusive and you're trying to teach people, do the games have more of an educational feel to them? Or, I mean, I know from experience from working with your titles what I think your answer is going to be, but I think for our audience, they would be very interested to learn about how you frame the content as you work with these inclusive partners.
I would say is a lot of you will learn something, but I will frame it more as it really allows you to be authentic and have content that feels true to who you want to represent. In the case of Never Alone, it felt true to the culture. You couldn't have done a game about Alaskan Native culture without having them. So as a gamer, as you go through the experience, you do get to learn about the culture, but it's not educational first. I think it's more about authenticity and really having a very compelling experience. Same thing with Beyond Blue. It was not about learning about the ocean itself. It was more about getting into what was affecting it, the kind of creatures that you will encounter, and make it really authentic about the topics that you were covering in the game.
Yeah, and I think too, both
Yeah.
of those games have really fun stories
Mm-hmm.
and some fun gameplay mechanics. So when you're playing them, you don't feel like you're being taught something. You feel
Yeah.
like you're having an experience and it's something fun and you want to share it with your friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say another thing about inclusive development is that it puts the team in a mindset where there is a lot of exploration and creativity based on that collaboration. And sometimes there is some innovation coming out, like you have like subgenres that come out of working together with your partners. How can you present some of the themes in a different way? We saw that with Never Alone, in how the storytelling was very, very unique, and lean into their tradition, their oral tradition.
All right, so let's talk about what the key elements are of inclusive development. So before you even start, I'm super curious, how do you figure out which projects you work on first? And then after you kind of get some projects in the pipeline, what are the things you do before you even start development?
Yeah, so it is important that whoever we partner with share our mission and share our goals and values. So it starts from there, and understanding that we're both having the same goals. And it is important also that once you feel that you're good partners and you want to go into this journey with all ups and downs and a little bit of a roller coaster, that you are aligned on what are your impact goals, what are your financial goals, and what are your risk tolerance. Because at the end of the day, we're making a commercial product where there has to be a return, it has to be sustainable, and that has to be an understanding from the beginning of where both are, so you can kick off the process.
Can you
Once,
explain what you mean when you say what your impact goals are?
yeah. So, like I said, for Eline, all our games have impact behind it. So the goals that we set, for example, are what do we want our content to change in our players once they play the game? Do we want them to learn about a culture? Do we want them to learn about what are the issues with the ocean right now? what are some of the practices that are affecting the biomes. So we work with our partners in setting up those goals, right? Goals can also, in terms of culture, can be we want to reach a global audience. We want them to know about the culture, or we want to, for example, more localized to the community around it. We want to impact the youth, for example, in the Alaska Native community. So we come up and we agree on that, and those are the impact goals that we are going to embed from the beginning in the development process and their track, and then see, did we met them or not once the game is launched.
So they definitely become a huge pillar for
Absolutely.
developing these games. And if the game doesn't hit these impact goals while you're developing and testing it, you will rework with your partners to get more close alignment on those.
Yeah, that's a really important thing that you're pointing out, Heather, is that you, throughout the process, you always have that check against your pillars, that every time you're moving along it, you're still keeping that goalpost in mind, and don't lose it.
So once you've found a partner and you've talked about your impact goals and your financial goals, what is the next step then?
The next step is identifying who's going to be that lead person from your partner that's going to be your point of communication and helping throughout the process. So it could be a lead cultural advisor, it could be a domain expert, and that person, or it could be a group or group of people, are the ones that are going to be interacting with the team on a regular basis, and embedding themselves in the team.
Wonderful. So if you have a lead domain person or a lead cultural person, how do other members of the community participate in this experience? Like, do you pull from other people in the community to provide roles or things on the team?
Yeah. So, like I said, it could be you have your lead, and then you have a team that also support that. I would say, for example, in the Keys of Never Alone, we were covering a lot of different topics about the culture. So every time there was a specific question about something, that cultural lead will go back into the community and find the right person that had the best knowledge about the topic, and then come back and work with the team, uh, and then figuring out what the process there. Sometimes it will be having workshops, or having small committees, or having a play test. So depending on the need of during production, that person will be the one, again, working with the team, figuring out how can we best problem solve this, or what will be the best way to find an answer for that.
So when you talk about engaging the broader community with workshops, is there an example of a way this was done that you can talk about?
Yeah. So I think this will be a good opportunity to talk about another project that Heather, with another indigenous tribe called the Choctaw. They were very interested in doing a game about the stickball, and there were workshops with the community, meaning we went there. Heather actually led one of those workshops, and with a group of young people from the community, and there were questions about the characters to help inform the direction, what was really resonating with them, since that was the audience that we were trying to create the game for. So as a young member of the community, how do you want to see yourself represented? And there was a workshop about that, workshop about potential content, storylines. Those were some examples of things that we work hand in hand. I don't know, Heather, you want to share a little bit more about
Yeah,
that?
I mean, it was very interesting because when we went to Mississippi to do these workshops, it was a middle school kids and high school kids. And one of the interesting things that I think, in addition to having an impact kind of globally, is that most of the projects I've worked on, especially with the tribes, they've wanted to have an impact within their tribe, specifically with the youth. And they pick video games because they know that is a medium that speaks to the young people, and they
Yeah.
want to get the young people excited about their culture, also interested in technology, because it's a nice way to introduce them to STEM careers and the idea that you can actually make video games. So when we did these workshops, it was really great because the kids were super excited. They drew concept art of characters. We asked them what types of stories or traditions that they would like to see in the game, and they came up with some really fun ideas. We also asked them what types of games they enjoyed playing and all of that. And what I found really interesting is that they were able to take a popular games like Fortnite or Apex Legends and then say, and it would really cool if you took that thing from Fortnite or Apex Legends or these other games
Mhm.
that I play and put it into our game. So they definitely were able to use these workshops as a way to really think big, which is what we want them to do. And it was just a lot of fun. And then they would also, that stickball game, they took us out on the stickball field and then they showed us stuff, right? Okay,
Yeah.
here's how you play stickball and all of that. Yeah, a lot of fun. All right, so next you have kind of figured out how your who your expert is, how you're interacting with them, the community's been brought along for the ride. What happens during development? You've started developing it. Do you normally have where do the development teams come from? Are they part of the group that is, um, providing the expertise? Is it a different development team? Can you talk a little bit about how you find the teams that work on these projects?
Yeah. So before we get to development, we usually go through a concepting phase, which is a very small team that works on it. And then once we feel good about some of this, we start bringing we start growing the team and filling out some of those high priority roles to start really going through the process of prototyping. So what is important there is, as we prototype, have a very close and open communication with our partners. Could be, domain experts or cultural advisors that are part of that process. We set up green light committees. So along the way, there are some checks that other members of the community have the opportunity to take a look at what we've been working on, give their feedback, and find a way where everyone feels comfortable moving along the development phase, that the content is being represented. Going back to Never Alone, in one of those green light committees, we were showing some of the concept art for Nuna, and it got to, it's looking to Disney. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's try a couple more, options, maybe artists and all of that. So those are a good checkpoints, and to calibrate if we're all on the same page, recheck again your impact goals, and then move on along. With our internal team, it is important that every time we bring a new team member, we go through an onboarding process, and the onboarding process is about not only what it means to work at Eline, but also getting very familiar with the culture or the subject matter that we're addressing in the game. So there is an onboarding that we have designed where team members come and really absorb and immerse themselves. And then we go through everything that has to do with, here are the goals that we're trying to achieve. So every time someone new is, again, joining, it's kind of passing along all that knowledge and really represent and what we're trying to do.
When you're working with your impact partners, do they ever have final say on any of the game content that's included? And what happens if they're like, I mean, you gave the example of Nuna, the main character, Never Alone.
Mhm.
They were saying, oh, the look is getting too Disney, let's bring it back. Were there other examples where maybe in that project or on the Beyond Blue where the people advising or being part of the process were like, this is just not appropriate, or we don't want to do this? How do you resolve things like that?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of moments during the development of the game that you just have to come together and problem solve, right? You have to find the middle ground, because sometimes there might be something that will make the game not as appealing as it could be. So it's almost like each wears their expert hearts. They wear their expert hats on the topic, and we wear the ones on game development. And you just have to come to a compromise and see what is best. I think in the original story, for Never Alone, it was supposed to be a boy and not a girl. So the team really felt that they wanted to be a girl, and the so we have to go back to the elders, ask if it was okay, and come to a compromise where, because there were creative reasons, can we do this? And they were great at working with us and great at finding solutions as well.
Yeah, the other big one I remember from that one is that the team had the Arctic fox as her playable
Right.
companion. And if
Yeah.
you've played the game, of course you love the Arctic fox. It's so cute. And she's, he hangs around with Nuna, but the tribe was really against that. When you go to Alaska, you do see Arctic foxes all over the place, and they're the equivalent of what was explained to us, raccoons.
Yes.
Basically, Arctic foxes dig in the garbage, they carry
Yeah.
rabies, and the elders and the tribe was taught the kids to stay away from Arctic foxes. And so they were initially not as excited about having a fox as the companion character because of how foxes, these creatures,
Right.
were viewed in the real world. Um, so the team, I know, went back and explored, well, could we do a wolf or something like that instead? And they were able, we had many of these conversations, as you were saying, over the
Yeah.
course of many months, where the team kind of explained their gameplay reasonings, but also trying to be respectful of the feedback they were getting. And then I know that the tribe also on their side kind of delved into games to see how animals were portrayed in games, the different ways that you could do that. And I think between both sides kind of looking outside of what they might normally consider, they were able to agree that it seems like the fox brings a lot to the game, and so yes, we can have it in there. And there were, the team wanted it because the fox was small and spry, which
Right.
had different characteristics than Nuna. But if you used a wolf, that was a much larger character, and so it wouldn't be as much of a balance between gameplay, right?
Mhm.
So that was
Yeah.
that
Well,
was
yeah.
fascinating.
Exactly. Extending into each other, it make more sense to have the fox. And I think again, that's what it was so wonderful about the project, is that they wanted to learn about games as much as we wanted to learn about the culture, and they really took it seriously. And like you said, they were willing to problem solve with us and finding solutions to it. um, as a little bit of, I guess, lore, when CITC first approached Eline with the idea of making a game, and it was them, not us, looking for it. It was they approaching us. Is yeah, they wanted to reach young people in the community, and they did their research, their homework, and they found that video games were a way to get to them. Uh, I would say, if you talk to our founders, Michael and Alan, they would say we try to tell them that it was not a good idea to make games, that it was very risky, but they were just, we want to do it. We feel that this, based on all the research that we've done, based on their side of de-risking their investment, they felt that games was the way to go to reach their youth and get them involved and again feeling proud of their culture. And they went into this crazy roller coaster with us. I don't think a lot of people know, but Eline is partially owned by CITC. So we're partially owned by an indigenous tribe, and we're very proud of that, because they really believe in us, and it has been a wonderful experience working with them. And I think it changed our lives. I don't
Oh,
want to speak for
absolutely.
you, but yes.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think it's also very telling that during this process, Eline, and the Cook Inlet Tribal Council decided that they wanted to continue working
Mhm.
together on a variety of impact development projects, like the Beyond Blue project, the Stickball project. And what's interesting about the Stickball project is that was the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians
Mhm.
had seen Never Alone, and they
Yeah.
got very excited by that and contacted Eline again, they contacted Eline and said, we would like to do something similar. We have a sport that is that is a huge part of our culture that we would like to see portrayed. I think we might be talking a little bit about that stickball game later on.
Yes.
I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of what's the nuts and bolts then. Like, it's great to say, hey, we have these partners, but what is it like to work together on the plan and process? Like, how often are you meeting? How do the timelines work? Like, with your production timelines, how do you account for the fact that you have this other layer of feedback that you're getting? How does that impact your scheduling? And sort of what sorts of ways do you do this? What kind of tools are you using? Do you do in-person meetings? Like, what does that look like?
Great question. So, in the time of COVID, so when we did Never Alone one, there was a lot of traveling to Alaska to meet their the community, see some of the landscape. Uh, and now that we're in COVID times, I think it'd be good in the sense that we do a lot of video calls, and when we're mapping out our timelines, we also allowed for those green light committees and checkpoints along the way. Sometimes it takes longer because we do have to come to a compromise and do some creative solving. But on a day to day, once we have, we start working on the concept, we use tools like video calls. We also have Slack channels where we try to have a more day to day communication. We do streaming since we can't travel. So when we have work in progress work, we do streaming within the engine or just showing concept art. So we like is really they're another team member. They're just not sitting next to us. And in these times, we're not sitting to anyone else anymore. So you really feel like there's a part of another team member. You have weekly meetings where we show up and we come with our questions. We work on open topics that we need to figure out, get their input very early on from the concept phase. So we're always taking that in consideration and not just waiting into to the end to get feedback.
Once the game is done and you've launched it, how do you handle sort of the launch aspect, the marketing, and the PR? How does that work?
So our marketing team works very closely with whoever our partner market team is. In the case of Never Alone, they have their unit, the marketing unit, and our team was working very very closely with them. We want we approach that from a again inclusive way where we're doing this together. It's not just that Eline team members represent the game. Is like we go someone that the community identified as we want this person to be the voice of. They come with us and they're part of that marketing cycle, and we try to collaborate in it. Again, is just let's do this together. We're telling your story, or you're the domain expert, the scientist. Let's have these panels. Let's talk about this, and just have them have the visibility as being part of the team.
Great. So, is this something that Eline uses on all of their games?
Yes, this is something that we use. We tweak depending on the game. Again, if it's a cultural advisor, if it's a scientist, or if there's another domain expert, depending on some of the other games that we're doing. We have some on the pipeline that I cannot talk yet about,
Yeah.
but we do lean into what's our partner. Let's see some how can we tweak the process, but at the end, what it encompasses is that we're doing this together. We are equal partners. Let's get working together from the beginning and defining our impact goals. What are our risks? What do we want to achieve with the game?
You mentioned that when you guys were making Beyond Blue, which is a game about the ocean and exploring it, that you had a scientist on site that was sitting with the team.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of what was the day-to-day like for this scientist? What sorts of things were they engaging with the team on?
Right. So Anna, she came here to our Phoenix studio, and some of the things that she was working very closely were what is the set of creatures that we're gonna see, right? And then after identifying that set, working on figuring out the references that then the artist we're gonna use to model the different again fish or the whale or turtles depending on what we were doing, figuring out okay, this is the reference, this is what you need to use, then checking in with the artist once they were first concepts and coming out. So she was also participating in that. She was participating in content for the different storylines and quests, ensuring that it was appropriate. She also did some play testing while she was at the studio, just to you know give her input on how things are feeling, um, working out tweaks to storylines or
Hmm.
to the art or even the character itself, if it makes sense, some of the dialogue that she was having with the other cast members and all of that. So it was really and she was key, and the team
Yeah.
really loved working with her and other more senior scientists that were not on a daily basis with us, but we were approaching them whenever there was a bigger topic to be covered.
Yeah, I'd love for you, if you're able to chat a little bit. Number one, about some of the technology that was portrayed in the game Beyond Blue. And again, for those of you who haven't played Beyond Blue, it's this really neat ocean exploration game. You swim around in the ocean, excuse me, and you see all these beautiful creatures. You can scan them. And then there's also a story involving a couple other scientists where you are using different types of technology to gather information about the ocean. Can you talk a little bit about the technology and how you converted that to something that could be part of the gameplay?
Yeah, I in Beyond Blue we took a little bit of liberty of imagining some of the technology. So, for example, Marai's suit, she doesn't have an oxygen tank like we will see on a diver, right? She has a special breathing mask. So we took some liberties on the technology and just thinking what will be the future. Of the ocean exploration, and this is where again working with our scientists we were okay, we don't want to cross the line of being science fiction here. We still want to be grounded in science. Could this be possible in 5-10 years from now? So for example, yeah, so her suit is one of those examples. Also we drones for exploration, and were another part where we collaborated and tried to imagine what can these drones do for us, get to places that humans cannot go because is it too dangerous, or is just the temperatures and that kind of things were things that we also worked. And I think they brought really interesting content to the game, and I think it just like get our imagination going or where we can go with the current technology, and just think about 5-10 years from now.
Yeah, and I think it's reflected in the fact that Beyond Blue is routinely listed on games that have something important and useful to say about the environment,
Yeah.
right? Regardless, it because it is very based in that science, and it does think sort of more realistically 5 to 10 years in the future,
Mhm.
what might things be like. And so I think that people enjoy the message that it has with that about, the ocean is part of us and our environment, and
We
let's
need to, yeah,
take care of it and things like that without being too preachy, right? Or making,
exactly.
yeah.
Without being like that, and in your in playing the game, you're absorbing that, and also learning things about deep sea mining that are themes that you really sometimes you really don't know a lot about it, but once you're in there following the storyline, learning about it, it just like sticks in your head. And I don't know, when I finished playing Beyond Blue, I was like, I want to learn more about this. I want to do my research and see what else can I do, after learning how important it is to take care of the ocean.
What are that actually that brings up an interesting point. One of the things that Eline does with their products is or their games is that they want to have the learning continue. Could you talk a bit about cultural insights, what those are, where that idea came from, why it's important, and why you include those in your games?
Absolutely. The first game that we have them was Never Alone One. Um, and as you play the game, you unlock around 26 small documentaries. And those documentaries kind of unpack some of the deep cultural themes that the game covered. They are told from the perspective of elders and community members, and they're so beautiful because they really tell you the story behind, you know, the blizzard, or behind why Nuna is named Nuna. And you I would say that gives just the context and the framework on the content that you're playing in the game. And we saw them as a way that, because they're optional and non-mandatory, they're not a gate for progressing in the game. uh, you kind of have the opportunity to come back and watch them, or watch them outside the game, learn about the topics that they're covering, and then take your time and maybe expand on some that you really feel connected to. But we what we saw is that it was very important for us to have the why we're doing it coming from the people that represented that specific theme in the game. So we when we talk about, the drones or the ocean exploration, having Sylvia Earle, telling the story about why she becomes so impassionate about the ocean, like what moved her. Or like I said, in Never Alone, having the elders in the community tell us about their hunting practices, the way they see the world, was important because they're the authentic voices that are giving a voice to the game itself.
Yeah, and I know that you guys put a lot of thought into which cultural insights you select because you do want to make sure that it's enhancing the game and you're not
Mhm.
just putting something in there because you're like, oh, this might be interesting. I know that from a design perspective, there are places where you unlock a specific cultural insight. Either you're doing something in the game and then a notification pops up, hey, you've unlocked this now. So it really is part of enhancing the gameplay. And like you said, the players can go back and look at it later or
Mhm.
choose not to engage with it. Um,
Exactly.
and I think what's so exciting about it is that for Never Alone, I think Eline sent the documentary crew out to kind of talk to people about the various topics that we were covering in the game, and the elders helped organize these sessions and recordings and whatnot. I think for Beyond Blue, you got footage from the BBC. Is that correct? Could you talk about where that footage came from?
Yeah, that was footage that was never before seen. It was not part of the documentary, and they gave us access to it, and so we felt like it was a great opportunity to show our players things that didn't make the cut to the series, the documentary series, and then we build those insights. And going back to your point, we try to lay them in a way that you're whatever you're experiencing in the game, the insight is giving you more context and more information about it, so it expands your understanding of that moment in the game.
Let's talk a little bit now about co-design. You'd mentioned a couple different ways how the experts in the team come together to think through all of these things. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that co-design might look like, and how you align the stakeholders across all of this content?
Yeah, the co-design again is part of the working together. So it goes a lot of taking feedback from the partners, consulting, working directly with, again, elders, although they're experts, ensuring that the game is delivering that appropriate experience.
Are they
And
seeing, do you send them like design documents or versions of the game? Like, how are they engaging with this information?
yeah, we send from design documents to work in progress concepts to uh, organize those streaming sessions where we are playing the game. Some of those are play tests that we try to get a build so they can play it together. In other cases, is reacting to a script when we're writing content. So that's part of the co-design, and also sometimes is the opposite way. They're sending things to us that we work and revise together. For example, part of getting the game out to the world is what is that community plan that we put together. So in the case of Never Alone, they taking the lead on this is how we see promoting the game within our community. So they send it our way, and we do a back and forth on doing that. But it's a lot. It's just think that is another team member, and is like let's bring them on, let's give them a seat, and then give them some tasks, and let's work together. And yeah, it's a back and forth depending on the what phase in the development you are, and what materials are you looking at.
So you've talked a lot about all the different ways, we're engaging. Who's responsible for actually implementing all of this and making sure these conversations are happening? What does that look like on your side?
So I would say that, ultimately, the team is responsible for adopting the process, but the one that is like holding the flag and responsible of really implementing and getting everyone through is the impact producer, the producer in the on the team, that is the one that is responsible for really do ensuring that this is adopted by everyone on the team, and that it goes from uh, the creative design all the way throughout the production process.
Yeah, I can imagine that person's probably pretty busy on the project, juggling two different. And I'd say that because I know that Carolina is the impact producer on all of these projects that we discuss.
And then Heather was producer and on that, so we got to collaborate a lot.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think this is a pretty obvious answer, but do you think that this inclusive development process makes better products?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, it does. I would say sometimes it takes longer and is a little bit, I wouldn't say difficult, but it just extends the time and all the support and infrastructure that you need to put behind it. But it's absolutely worth it, because at the end of the day, it just feels so authentic and is full of unique elements that otherwise you wouldn't be able to get there. And then, like I said, you surprise yourself sometimes on how it actually gets the team to come up with really inventive gameplay that is just complementary to either the culture or the specific theme that you're coming up together. So I think it's absolutely worth it. It takes time and effort,
Yeah.
but yeah, do it.
And I think one of the things that takes the time and effort that is a little bit something new the game development team has to be aware of is oftentimes, at least on the projects we've worked on, the partners are not game developers.
Mhm.
And some of them don't even really play games. They just have a desire to be in this medium. So they don't know all the ins and outs of how to actually make a game, what makes good gameplay. And so when you're having these conversations, I think it's very important for the game developers to honestly take a back seat sometimes instead of jumping in and saying, "Oh, well, you can't do that way in the game. You've got to do it this way,"
Mhm.
because you don't want to squelch the impact and authenticity of what they're trying to do. And I think that is one reason why things take longer. It's because you are um, engaging the tribe or the scientists in an arena in which they're unfamiliar, so they are learning about it as they go. And even though they may not have strong game ideas at the
Hmm.
beginning, you still have to give them that room to talk and to teach you guys or to the team instead of just cutting them off. I mean, of course, there's nothing more frustrating than you trying to say something and a person who thinks, oh, well, you can't do it that way because
Right.
that's not how you do it in a game. Like, that's not going to go anywhere. So it is very much this organic process where you're sitting in meetings. And I know that sometimes as a game developer, it can be somewhat frustrating and how slow this process can go, especially at the beginning, but I think you've demonstrated that that time investment is well worth it because you do get a much better product when you get to the end of all of it.
Absolutely, you do. And some of the things that we learned with Never Alone, and uh, we're working on Never Alone too, is that part of that onboarding is for both the development team and our cultural partners involve what you're describing, Heather, where they know nothing about game development, just as some of our new team members know nothing about their culture. So it's finding that common onboarding. So how can we teach them about game development? So things that we've done is game development 101. It's starting what are the phases of development. So when we are planning together and talking about a timeline, when we say we're in concepting or we're in an alpha or we're going to be in a beta, that is now common terminology that we can talk about it, and we are the same understanding. Talking also about what are the different roles in the teams, because they don't know nothing about it, right? So what does a concept artist does, or a game level designer, or an engineer that specializes in gameplay. So it's coming up also with that onboarding package again, or let's come together, have a same understanding, because that's where the magic start happening, where we're both in that mindset and we start collaborating and have that common language.
Absolutely. All right. So, where do you see inclusive development heading? Like, how can we collaborate with people with diverse knowledge sets, abilities, ways of life? Like, how far can this go?
So that's a great question, and it's something that we're asking ourselves now that we start working on a few new projects. Again, we see that taking a step up is how can we really uh, bring the community to be part of the game, not just as a lead cultural advisor of a part of a committee that is there, but can we open our talent pool to more members of the community? So, for example, can some of the quests be written in collaboration with, maybe in the case of Never Alone, with an Alaska Native, or can we write it in collaboration with one of the subject matter experts? Can we have artists from the community helping with the concepting process? Can we have more of the young people in the community be part of the testing and feedback, and enlisting them to be our heads of QA, and helping us through the process? And that is something that we're thinking about. How can we do that on this never on this inclusive development 2.0? Can we think about our cultural insights in a different way? Is there an opportunity to frame it in a different way? Can they be more embedded in the content that we do or the game? So those are some of the things I think. In general, is just how can we take this, make it more accessible
Hmm.
to our players, to the content, to our communities, and that's where we see it. We see it as being something that is really pulling, and is a high pillar in every of the games that we do.
Yeah, and I think ultimately, how can you get some of these subject matter experts or indigenous people to be full-time members of the game development team? I think is kind of a goal as well. Like, how can you create a pipeline
Mm-hmm.
to create opportunities to build their talent so that they could have a game company or a game developer.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's an amazing, great talent. So we do want to. Yeah, I mean, it also raised the bar on goals, because we do need to identify those roles, and we do need to put the effort into finding the talent that comes from the community. But it's something that we're passionate about, and we just feel that it's going to make the game feel a more authentic experience.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, now we're going to go to the questions in the chat. So the first one is from Discord. The question is, are there any good locations we can recruit from to add more diversity to our team?
Locations.
Like, where do
I
you go and find? I think part of the question is people want to have diverse teams. Maybe they're not working with a tribe like
Right.
Eline, but where do you go to find people for your team?
That's a great question. It's not that there is that one place that I go and, here's all the diversity talent. I'm here waiting. It takes a little bit of actually strategizing and planning and identifying some organizations. So we like to work with indies. Is a very diverse organization. So whenever we have an open positions, we like to use them as a way of posting our
And it's called
jobs.
it's workwithindies.com.
Yes, work with indies. We also are looking into different Discord groups. So there are diversity champions, and they are other Discords that are female led. So we try to make those connections and socialize our postings there. I wish there was one button that would say, here's all, look, but it takes a little bit of planning and finding the organizations that align with what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think too, also when you're trying to recruit diversity on your team, you have to allow time to get a pool of applicants that is diverse to begin with, so that you can interview them and go through them, just like with the process. If you try to rush it, it makes it,
Yeah.
I think, more difficult, because takes some time to go out to these Discord channels and put the word out.
And put the word out, and also get the buy-in from upper management that this is you want to do this, and it's going to take time, but let's do it.
Yeah. Another question from Discord. What are some of the missteps that could happen early in production that other teams may see happen? So what are some of the production missteps that happen when you're doing this inclusive development process?
Yeah, some of that being like some of the content that or themes that we develop, assuming that this is how for example, is portrayed, without asking or having a session with our cultural partners before. So some of the things that we have to go back to, oh, that's not the right color for it, or that's not the right way in which they will communicate. So and we had some of those where we're like, okay, I think we got it, and we will go and do our thing and then come back, and there was like, no, this is not how it will happen, or this is not really how it represents us. So those have been some of the production, and based on those, we have adjusted our process in having a more day-to-day daily communication, as opposed of bi-weekly or once a kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree that you never want to assume when you're working on these types of projects, because as soon as you do, it's not going to be correct. And once you have your pipeline set up, it's very easy to go to your point of contact or to your committee and say, hey, here's a question. Again, I mean, that's part of the time factor too, is that you feel compelled as a developer. I want to make a quick decision. I want to make this sash red. I just want to make it red. I don't want to wait 24 hours for an answer. But if you don't, then you're going to have to rework it anyway. Okay, we have another question. How did you handle the education side of the product? Educating tribes about games and educating developers about the culture.
So on the educating our indigenous partners, We actually put together a package where it was, I'm not kidding, development 101. And again, we selected some articles and literature for them to read. We also selected a list of newsletters, gaming newsletters for them to subscribe, and identifying some key people in the gaming industry to follow as well. And and then every time that we had this sessions and meetings with them, we're trying to frame them like this is a concept review, and we would like your feedback on. And that's the way that we were doing the educating on the side of learn all about the development. On us learning about their culture, they work workshops. We also they gave us articles and documentation to read. They have some guides on framing their culture, where is their way of seeing the world, where are their values, their mission. So they also they put together that package for us. And honestly, a lot of that you just happens naturally during the conversations, and where they lead. And sometimes we go down to a specific theme, and they start sending us a YouTube video, or an article or a picture, or things like that. So it's also a little bit of organic as we
Yeah.
go.
And I know on both the Stickball Project and Never Alone, there was a fair amount of travel.
Hmm.
I went to Alaska multiple
You
times and
went,
to
yeah.
Mississippi, and part of those visits were, of course, to meet face to face
Hmm.
with the community, where we would attend events and celebrations just as guests. We would go into people's homes. We would
Hmm.
visit their museums.
Take
And it's
pictures,
take
yeah.
pictures, take reference photos,
Yeah.
especially for those cultures where there's a strong oral tradition and
Hmm.
there's not necessarily a lot written down. So it's very exciting as a developer to work on these projects.
It is, yeah.
All right, next question from Discord. With games like Never Alone and TV shows like Reservation Dogs, we are seeing more storytelling from indigenous people. What are the marketing challenges that these games could face? And this will be our last question.
Hmm. I think some of the marketing challenges would be that they might we might get some comments on, why are you making a game about this culture, like who are you to represent these people. And I think that that's the marketing behind it, on having a very clear message that it's not us telling this story, we're actually telling the stories in collaboration with our partners, and framing it that way, because it could be misinterpreted like, oh, here's another game studio, telling the story about an indigenous tribe without really knowing about it. So a lot of our marketing goes behind, and that's why it's important when you're setting up your process, is that who on the, in this case, Never Alone side, is going to be our face that is going to go and talk about the game, talk about the process, and represent it out there. Because at the end of the day, is their story, is their IP that we're telling. We're just being the ones that are helping them uh, making it into a video game.
Yep. And I do think that was our last question, but I wanted to also mention to folks that the Museum of Modern Art in New York City just opened a new exhibit about video games and interactive
Yes.
storytelling, in which Never Alone is sort of the featured product. And they built the exhibit around Never Alone because of the storytelling and what it shows you can do with games and things like that. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? I think you got about 30 seconds, Carolina.
Yeah, I would say is now part of the permanent collection at the MoMA. So the team is absolutely thrilled and excited about the game. I would say it's becoming like a cultural artifact, and now being part of the museum. And if you're in New York, go see it. And if not, don't worry, you'll still have some time because it's going to be part of the permanent collection. And yeah, it's we're all very proud of the reach and the impact that the game, after all these years, still continue to have and touch people.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much, Carolina.
No, thank you so much for
Thank you
having me. It was so
both.
much fun. Yes.
That was awesome. All right. So if you're out there watching, give us 60 seconds to flip channels here, and we're going to be right back. Next up, we have better playtesting for indie developers from Steve Bromley, and we'll be back in just a minute.